The start of the 2024 Paris Olympics is just a few weeks away. Soon, more than 10,000 of the world's best athletes will convene to take their shot at earning a bronze, silver, or the coveted gold medal. Meanwhile, the rest of us will be watching the festivities and rooting for our favorite athletes from home or at a local pub. During the last Olympics in Tokyo in 2020, more than 3 billion viewers tuned in across TV and digital platforms. NBC Universal, which owns the U.S. media rights to broadcast the event through 2032, reported selling $1.2 billion in advertising for the 2020 Tokyo Games. This past April, the company publicized that it had already exceeded this number and was on track to set a new record for ad sales. As big as this number may seem, it's not out of the ordinary. Each year, sports bring in hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. And recently, a new face is trying to break into this industry. Saudi Arabia has been investing heavily to establish itself as a global sports hub. Over the last few years, the country has non-stop formed new international leagues and teams across golf, soccer, Formula One, cricket, and other sports.
What is happening in Saudi Arabia right now is a project in its initial stages, so it's immature. And so we're not seeing large numbers of events supported by significant infrastructural development, underscored by or underpinned by a coherent tourism strategy, for example. This is ongoing. And this is really important because we do believe that Saudi Arabia will host the FIFA World Cup for men in 2034. There are rumors possibly of a Saudi Arabian 2036 Olympic bid.
That's Simon Chadwick, a professor of sports and geopolitical economies at Schema Business School in France. Chadwick says that more niche sports like horse racing and falconry have long been part of Saudi Arabia's culture, but it wasn't until the latter part of the 20th century that soccer, or in Europe what's known as football, really took off. Today, the country has spent billions to acquire some of the biggest names in the sport, like Portuguese sensation Cristiano Ronaldo. Many experts point to Saudi's de facto ruler, Mohammed bin Salman, for this nonstop expansion into sports.
It was very important in changing the emphasis from more traditional pursuits like falconry and equine sports to not only more modern sports. And when I use this word modern again, I think about esports as another example, which obviously is a very kind of late 20th and early 21st century phenomenon. But he has been the principal initiator of this focus on sport and this focus on sports investments.
With this shift, there are many critics who argue that Saudi Arabia is trying to revamp its global image through sports. The country has long been known as a conservative state with hardline traditional values around religion, gender norms, free speech, and what's generally accepted in society. It's also no stranger to past human rights controversies and unfair labor practices.
We know, many of us, that Saudi Arabia has a particular reputation, and that is an outcome of several episodes over the last 20 years. And so I think brand Saudi Arabia is trying to change perceptions, is trying to change attitudes, is trying to get us to see the country in a different way. And sport helps it to do that. And as I say, some people might label this sport washing, other people would label it as soft power. And soft power is essentially when countries try to persuade us that they're actually quite like us and they're not different and they're not threatening, that they are legitimate members of the international community. And so in terms of how I would characterize Saudi Arabia overall, we got lots of fighting, fast cars and football, soccer events taking place there, which is typically what you would find in the United States, in Britain, in France, in Germany, in Australia and other parts of the world. So that kind of underscores this whole observation about legitimacy and about soft power.
While this may be part of the narrative, there are also a handful of other reasons behind the country's heavy push into sports.
Saudi Arabia is a country that is hugely dependent upon oil revenues to sustain itself, maybe as much as 40% of GDP annually. And so sport is part of a diversification strategy at a time when obviously the world is kicking back against fossil fuel consumption. The Saudi Arabian economy does need to be more resilient and needs to be able to withstand what potentially will be a very important pivot away from fossil fuels across the world.
Another driver is that the country's population is very young. 70% of citizens are under the age of 35 and are tech-savvy, spend a lot of time online, and use social media.
One of the things that I think Saudi Arabia is mindful of is the potential for these young people to become disaffected. If you consider that during the Arab Spring, 12, 13, 14 years ago, the average age of an Arab Spring protester was 26 years old. And what the Saudi authorities are very keen to do is to ensure that we don't see any popular uprising, any questioning of the government. And so sport is one of the ways in which the country is addressing that.
There could be a myriad of other reasons why the oil-rich Gulf country is really investing billions and billions of dollars into these leagues. The reality is that we may never really know. But some optimists are hoping that this will lead to larger cultural shifts in the region as the country takes on a more active role on the global competition stage.
For those of us who believe that sport has the power to do good things to change societies, we could say that Saudi Arabia is a very interesting case study about how transformational sport can actually be.
Join us next week in the first half of Viewpoints for part 2 of this story on Saudi Arabia's expansion into sports. To find out more about our guest, Simon Chadwick, head to viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes and to support our show, follow Viewpoints Radio on Instagram, X, and Facebook. This segment was written by our executive producer, Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson. This segment is brought to you by Capital One. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.